Lots of discussion around social media and its addictive effects on adolescents encourage users and parents to shut down the services, but in reality, this can be a lot more complicated. On this episode of Today in Tech, we're going to talk about some of the different ways that end users and parents can become more active in their social media usage. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me on the show today is John Paul Simon. He is the Director of Clinical Interventions in Schools for CarePlus New Jersey, as well as the Assistant Director of NJ4S Bergen Hub. Welcome to the show, John Paul.
What's up, Keith?
You got two big positions there. I mean, you're busy all the time, it sounds like.
I mean, it's a good thing when you're working, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right. So again, thanks for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us about a lot of these issues around social media and addiction. But before we start getting into that, I want to just jump in with a quick question. Part of this narrative around social media and the potential addictions within adolescents kind of focuses on the idea that social media is bad, but we do want to talk about framing this that there are some aspects of social media that are good, correct?
Absolutely. I think with any topic, you just have to look at the context. It's easy to kind of throw things under the bus, especially the unknown. I'm a bit older in demographics, so, the new music is never as good as the old. What's new is scary, but there's a lot of good in tech, and there's a lot of purpose in social media, depending on how you frame it, like you said.
Okay, and so can you explain a little bit about the work that you do with either the CarePlus New Jersey and or the Bergen Hub, and how did you get involved in recognizing a lot of the issues around social media and addiction?
Absolutely. So I've been working with the CarePlus company for a little bit over a decade. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Mm-hmm. Throughout my career, I've worked with adolescents, and whether it's a school setting or an outpatient setting or a community setting, I've always wondered, what are the effects of environment? What helps youth, adolescents become, healthy, thriving adults? And ultimately, what are the challenges that contribute to the mental health symptoms that exist in our world today? And NJ4S Bergen in particular, it's an interesting model that was rolled out by the state of New Jersey this September. The governor, Phil Murphy, had allocated funds, which is, I believe, near $16 million to a school-driven, prevention-based program to address mental health challenges that were birthed from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mm-hmm. And so when did you first start to notice, either through your sessions with either of those positions, when did you start noticing that social media was having an addictive effect? Or was it, is it something that you saw in your own cases, or was it because you were reading a lot more about this and seeing, other cases out there?
I think with the cases that I had personally, and the students who I worked with directly, it was never a direct referral or case about social media addiction. It was more so the consequences from behavior. Mm-hmm. So you had a student who was either super depressed or displayed a bunch of anxiety. And once you get to know that student during sessions, a bit of their story comes out in terms of, I've got the curse of comparison. I'm depressed because when I scroll on Instagram, I kind of see influencers or kids my age or older than me having more expensive items in their lives, who have parties and all those highlights. And I think in terms of a wider lens, 2017, 2018 is when I first started seeing research being done on possible chronic diseases or addiction to technology, not necessarily social media, because back then it was lumped into everything. So it was computer gaming / Facebook, which at this point almost sounds archaic when you bring it up.
Right. And so a lot of whenever we start talking about these types of issues, we start assuming that, well, the first thing that a parent should do would be just take away their phone if they get a sense that their kid is using their phone too much. I'm a parent myself, and that's sometimes the first, if we need to get our kids' attention, the first thing we do is like, all right, give me your phone or turn off your phone. But in terms of social media addiction, that necessarily isn't a bad thing. I mean, it is a good thing, right? You can't just kind of go cold turkey with this. I mean, is cold turkey good in any kind of addiction treatment?
I mean, depending on the individual,
Yeah.
cold turkey might work. For someone who, who's neurologically wired in a specific way, going cold turkey might throw them into a spiral. So when I work with parents and other professionals, I always give them that fair warning of prescribing an overarching solution isn't necessarily best practice. And to sort of look at something, if we look at addiction as prolonged behavior or uncontrollable behavior, that idea of taking something away or deprivation, it's your classical conditioning. And I don't think in general, but specifically for social media and tech use, taking something away is that simple.
Okay. And I want to get into some of the, like, maybe parents might not realize or understand what are some of the signs that their child might be addicted to social media or scrolling or whatever they're doing, or their phone. I mean, it just could be the phone. It doesn't necessarily have to be social media. So what are the things that parents should be looking for? And are they the typical ones that is it more that you should be looking for signs of behavioral issues or specific to social media addiction?
I think there are some signs that are specific to social media use, and then other just general advice for curtailing or curbing any addictive behavior. For parents, I would first start off at continued observation, whether or not your kid is addicted or is barely utilizing their phone and or other tech devices. Just always be an observant parent, not a helicopter parent, not a neglectful parent, but a parent who just keeps an eye on things. I know it almost sounds commonsensical, but I think it's always good to set that baseline standard. And you had mentioned, the idea of like, or the nuances of compulsion, right? That idea of a kid always, I need to check my phone. I got to check my phone. They'll go into a meltdown if you take away their phone.
Right.
For parents, it's almost checking themselves in terms of, am I being compulsive in the way I parent or facilitate, consequences? And so number one, observing. Number two, being able to read patterns, right? So if your kid is on 2 hours a day, if you notice, in a week, they're up 6 hours a day, 8 hours a day. So drastic changes is one thing to really look for. And for, depending on the age of an adolescent, I would also look at their own awareness of compulsion, right? I know for myself as an adult, sometimes I just pick up my phone and check.
Right.
It's mainly to look at the time. But for students, sometimes they're checking because if I don't check my Instagram, or if I don't check my Discord or whatever messaging platform I have, FOMO, I'll miss something. I won't be part of something. And more often than not, that social media tie-in of connectivity is what draws the addiction. So it's not necessarily the behavioral picking up the phone, looking at the screen. Those are, I think, deeper neurological tie-ins we can discuss a bit later. But just in terms of what's the purpose of social media, it's human nature regarding increasing connection to others. So the idea of taking that away is almost counterlogical to human biology.
Yeah, you mentioned that you see parents picking up their phone too, and like, how often do you see that when you're talking with some of the kids about some of their problems, and then the parent is there as well and they're doing the same thing? Is it a case where the kids are mimicking what the parents are doing, or is it The parents might they might not recognize that they might have an issue as well.
It's funny, right? So you can have that parent who's yelling at their kid to knock it off and get off of TikTok. You're on it all day, and they're at a diner or at their own dinner table, and they're scrolling through Facebook because that's what us old timers use, right?
Right.
So I get teens going, I don't get why my mom wants to take my phone away when she's on Facebook the entire day. And so there's that bit of a gut check for parents. Number one, if you're looking to foster, active participation and responsible usage of social media, check your own behavior. And I get it, depending on the age of your child. Now we're talking toddlers, elementary school kiddos. Sometimes you just got to give that kid, if it's a long car ride, they get the tablet, right? So the tech piece of like, okay, it does service something, but if it's becoming your babysitter, or if it is becoming that connection and only line of connection, then again, we ask ourselves, how helpful is this?
Yeah, and when we were talking before the show, you brought up a point that I wanted to ask you about because I forgot what you meant by this, but you did say that kids use their devices differently than adults do. So what are the ways that they're using their smartphones that adults might not be recognizing with this framework of social media?
Sure, specifically with social media,
or in general, if you want.
Yeah. Well, let's start at the framework of social media and sort of break down the complexities from an adolescent perspective. So just an overall, view of social media, it's a platform or an app that's meant to have access to provide content, right? So you can post a story, a reel, a meme, a video. So it's meant to share. And then there's the connecting aspect of I can comment on other people's posts. I can friend request. I can direct message. And so that's the baseline thought of when you ask any general citizen what social media is, they'll probably give you that description. When you speak to an adolescent about what their social media is, or more so how they view tech, you'd be very surprised that most of their communication doesn't necessarily occur on an instant messaging app. I'll go back to those elementary school kids. I know there's probably parents out there who have to deal with this. You have kids who may be obsessed with Roblox or obsessed with Fortnite.
Right.
And you would, that's a video game. That's not social media. However, with open world gaming and the idea of connectivity within a gaming platform, you can instant message people there, right? For console users, kids are asking for these $300 headphones so they can talk smack,
right,
to other kids, on the game. So it's not just this idea of Facebook, Instagram, but it can be something that's accessed through a non-traditional a game,
right,
or path.
I realized, I think so. My kids are a little bit older, but when they were younger, they were on Roblox a lot. And it's likely that they were chatting just as much than they were playing whatever module or game that they were in, more than, they were probably doing more of the messaging than the actual game playing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when you look at the science of tech or the business of gaming, developers create these open worlds to keep kids on, right? The longer you're on, the better it works for them. I'm not saying they're necessarily fostering addiction. I think they're fostering sustaining.
Right.
Stay on the platform, keep the game on as long as possible.
Right, so that they can then sell you an ad at some point or pop in an advertisement as well and that's how they make their money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that parallel process too. And when you talk about responsible usage, when you're having a conversation, whether it's an elementary school child, and I do encourage parents to start at that age because kids are smart, right? I remember freaking out when I would see my 3-year-old nephew work an iPad so easily. So there's this idea of if you start it early, you have that discussion and frame it in a sense of don't be on, like you'll hear, don't stay on too long, right? You'll go blind. That's what my mom used to tell me when I was on my Nintendo.
Right. Or when I was watching TV as a kid. Yeah, that was the big thing. Don't get too close to TV. You'll go blind, or don't watch too much.
Absolutely. Versus, hey, when you're on and you are talking to folks, be responsible. Don't give out your home address. Don't give out information. So more of an active discussion and an active conversation about the use of platforms.
Yeah. So again, that leads me into my next question of some of the steps that everyone can take to become more active, because it feels like whenever we talk about this idea of social media addiction, we start talking about like we're just on the phone and we just start scrolling. And I mean, they came up with a word for it. It's doom scrolling. You're just basically wasting time watching this stuff go on and on and on. How, what are some of the steps? Is it just being more active and recognizing that this is what they're doing, so that you can kind of combat that by saying, oh yeah, I do need to not be on this phone so much?
Yeah. I think it's that active awareness and that knowledge of, in terms of this tool that I'm using, how does it fully work?
Yeah.
So the design or the concept of doom scrolling exists because, and I'm not a developer. I probably will use the incorrect verbiage, but there's that idea of even like websites, right? Or the screen. It's designed to have infinite scrolling.
Right.
So if infinite scrolling is there, doom scrolling is part of the blueprint. And so letting parents and users know. So parents, when you speak to your kids, and adults, when you sort of check in with yourself, how many minutes do I allow myself to doom scroll? Right? So being able to schedule your poison in a sense. Like, I can't tell you, listen, you got to limit it to this amount of time. That's up to a parent.
Yeah.
That's up to a family. That's up to an individual. When I'm in therapy and I work with clients, I never tell them direct answers. I'll allow them that level of autonomy, and you need to make a conscious decision of what works for you. And if you know there's an infinite amount of scrolling can occur, how often are you going to take a break, right? I don't know where HR got it from. In my company, it's like, it's recommended that you get up every 20 minutes, face away from your computer, look 20 feet away for whatever many minutes to reset your eyes. I know there's science to that. Same thing with parents when they set the science of their rules, right? Here are the ground rules.
Yeah.
After how many episodes or how many videos you need to go touch grass, go outside.
Yeah. From a psychology standpoint, or from your work as a therapist, is there research that talks about replacing or using the phone to basically replace boredom, for example? So it feels like a lot of kids are using their phone, whether it's playing games or anything like that, just because they're bored, and that's something that replaces or gives them a boredom replacement. Like, again, if I'm waiting in the doctor's office, I think before phones, you would just sit and look at the pile of magazines that were 2 to 3 months old. But now it's you just take your phone out, pop a game in, pop your social media feed. Like, is that, how do you delineate between boredom replacement and addiction? Or has that not been researched?
So the research, it's interesting. It always talks about what the outcomes are or what the ill effects are, right? So there's correlation with social media usage, with self-perception. There's a correlation with social media usage and depressive system, or the presence of anxiety. But in terms of the purpose of behavior, I'm not sure if that's really studied.
Yeah.
So that idea of, and I like the way you frame it too, it's this, I'm picking it up because I'm bored. So when you look at signs of addiction, there's this idea of measuring time, measuring the context of it. Am I healing? Am I doing something? And then that translates into purpose, right? So someone who may be addicted to social media or just overall tech is somebody who's compulsively picking up the phone for no reason, right? if I'm at my doctor's office, I'm going to pick up my phone, check my Facebook messages, check my emails. There's purpose to that behavior.
Right.
And so what delineates addiction from, I guess, just usage would be the idea of control. Mm-hmm. What's the context of this behavior? Am I just picking it up? And then once you sort of iron out what that context and purpose is, what happens if you don't have access to that tool, right? Will you freak out?
Yeah.
Some kids, they'll freak out. I don't know where my phone is. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it?
Yeah.
As if, their life would end if it were gone versus, I'll find it. I'll find it later. I'll go back to it later. Right.
I want to address some of the things that are on a lot of these social media platforms in terms of content.
Sure.
And a lot of the discussions that we hear are this idea of a rabbit hole that people go down. And if you start watching one type of video, the algorithm kicks in and will start saying, oh, Keith liked watching the video of the cute puppy. So we'll send him more cute puppy videos because, again, it wants you to stay on as long as possible. How many people do you think, do you think a lot of people understand this, or is that something that needs to be kind of shouted from the mountaintops of, they are controlling you with the content that you're seeing? Then there's a part two to that question too. So I'll ask, go ahead and answer the first part.
Sure.
How many people do you think are aware of that?
I think in general, there's a surface level awareness of, wow, like the last 20 videos I've seen are corgis and dogs, or I don't understand why my feed is only sending me cooking videos. I think with consumers being more informed these days, they understand the science of it, but I'm not certain if they're equating it to this company or this app wants me to stay hooked.
Right.
They want me to continue scrolling. Yeah. I don't think they're connecting it to that. I think they're informed in terms of, this is why I have the content I'm watching.
Right. Like I want to use social media to find out what's going on in the world, or not news-wise, but like some of the popular trends. But I never get to those because the algorithm keeps feeding me scrolls of dogs or scrolls from Star Trek or what other types of interests that I have that I can never, unless I start, I guess, typing in, search terms and things like that. I guess that's one way. But can users be more active to control the types of content they see?
Yeah. How do you,
how do you fight that black hole by, I guess, is it just typing in other things to look for?
That ultimate challenge of how do I break the algorithm?
That's like what I do with Amazon. Right? I try to break the algorithm. Like Amazon's algorithm is all messed up with me because I use it to buy gifts for people. And I would use it to buy gifts, at Christmas time. So, either I'm buying for myself, at which point I'm a middle-aged guy, but then I'm also buying for my teenagers, and that's a whole other different algorithm because they never really delineated between the two.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's kind of like when I'm shopping, is it Amazon's choice or Keith's choice, right?
Yeah.
You'll get specific, whether it's a boosted item or a boosted listing, and that isn't necessarily your conscious decision. Does it help in context? Sure. If you're shopping specifically for someone, that's when it's useful.
Right.
But if it's sort of just freewheeling it, then you're like, wow, like nothing's coming up for me. Ultimately, an informed consumer would say, I need to walk away from it.
Right.
Non-active participants, they'll sort of just like blindly scroll. I'm going to keep going until I find something I want. Now you're in a place of David versus Goliath.
Right.
This idea of I'm just going to play slots with these posts until Instagram or TikTok shows me something I like. I think sort of that passive approach is going to contribute to the prison that you can sort of find yourself
in. Right. And especially as if you start focusing on some of that negative content that you brought up at the beginning of the show here, where, you know, someone's like, oh, I'm watching social media and I don't have the nice clothes that these other people have. And if I guess if I'm going to be more active about it, I'd recognize that and not stop on those types of videos, I guess.
Yeah.
Tell the algorithm I'm not interested in this.
One thing that I want to bring up and something that you said is that idea of, you know, I want to use this platform and this tool to, you know, better inform myself. I want to use it to learn something. I want to use it to discover something. And being that type of a user versus, I don't know what your thoughts are on this. Sometimes people fool themselves into thinking, oh, I'm informing myself, but utilize whatever platform as echo chambers. Right. And that's another way people can get addicted. So this leans more towards the adults and the older adults, because this idea of social media addiction is not just relative to adolescents and young adults.
Right.
Like, you know, you've got that joke about like the grandma fell into like the tinfoil hat corner of Twitter, and all of a sudden, you know, like their rooms are bugged. The government is infiltrating. So there's this idea of purpose. What am I utilizing? And you know what? If you're utilizing Instagram to find corgi videos or to find recipes, then so be it. You're informed.
Right.
But if, again, blindly scrolling, that spells out doom.
Right. And again, if I was going to try to invent a social media platform that provided content that presented a wide view of everything, I think I would fail, because people would watch it for about 3 minutes and then they would stop because I wasn't giving them more of what they were interested in or liking in. And so I don't know if there can be a general purpose algorithm that shows you the good of everything in the world. I don't know. Maybe that's just me being a Pollyanna there. I wanted to ask you about the work that you do in schools. Do other students and teachers, are they recognizing that this is an issue, or do they have bigger concerns around this topic or other concerns?
I think at every level in the academic institution, conversation or dialogue around social media is present. So we'll get requests for programming with teachers, right? How do I utilize social media usage as part of my teaching tools? How do I responsibly utilize it as an educational tool? Parent workshops are requested for how do I, you know, kind of the topic that we're having today, how do I have an active discussion with my children about being responsible users of social media?
Yeah.
And then ultimately there's this tie-in of schools requesting both parent workshops and professional developments around bullying and social media.
Right.
Which I think, you know, that would probably be another episode or another conversation if you go into the parallels of what adolescent communication offline looks like and how it's magnified and just really almost weaponized at this point.
Right.
And from the individual perspective, from students, I mentioned it earlier, the correlation, and at this point we can safely presume that direct relation to how self-image, confidence, identity is often controlled or affected by social media.
Yeah. I think the biggest issue we've seen as parents with some of my kids has been kind of cyberbullying via exclusion. And do you know what I mean by that? Like, so there's examples of where Snapchat has a location-based tool where you can see where your friends are. And, you know, a couple of, you know, sometimes my kids would pop up that map and see that their friends were at a location after the friend had just told them, oh, well, I'm going to be staying home tonight, or I've got we can't hang out because I'm doing something with my parents, and then they discover they're at this party where all these other people are, or they find out that their friends are all at a party because they've been posting photos on Instagram and all these other social media. Like, wait, how come I'm not there? That type of FOMO, like you said. And that's
those unintended consequences.
That's a form of bullying, right? In some respect, or is it unintentional?
It is. I think it's an unintended consequence, especially if you take a look at the 80s and the 90s, you would ask a girl out, oh, I can't go out with you, I'm washing my hair. Right? Yeah. I think that's the good old adage, the Saved by the Bell reference.
Cliche, right.
I'm washing my hair tonight, right? Yeah. And Zach Morris or AC Slater, as popular as they are, there was no way they could verify if Jessie was washing her hair that night. But now, and again, you have to look at it through a multi-layered lens, because you have this added bonus of being able to pin locations. That unintended consequence can be, oh, I missed out.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and I don't think this is necessarily driven by the platform, but more so driven by the user, you'll have a group of friends say, hey, let's all leave our locations on. Let's directly lie to our friend. We know they're going to check this later.
Right.
Like posting up. And so part of what I see sometimes is I'm going to post a selfie to make my ex jealous.
Okay.
So there's that purpose of they're doing this and how bullying is tied in. They're doing this so that one individual can actually see it.
Right.
That's when it's weaponized versus an unintended consequence.
And is that something that's becoming more and more common, or is it just on an outlier basis?
It's definitely more common. The idea of bullying is, and now with times catching up to tech, the assumption is online bullying looks like Johnny posted a hateful message to Alan.
Right.
And that's it. But that's not the case. You just mentioned, right? Bullying by exclusion. A lot of microaggressions or just passive aggressive behavior is easily executed online.
That's problematic, I guess. So can parents do anything about that other than I just tell my kids to just don't post where you are? I mean, that's more from a safety issue as well. But
yeah, I was going to say from a parenting standpoint, making, again, it's almost like that instruction manual of how to use a tool.
Yeah.
That idea of this is the purpose of location services. It's not just leave it on, turn it off, but more so as your parent, this is why I want to see you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I would ask depending on the age of your child, it's like, listen, how do you and your friends utilize the locations? Right. So for them, it's easy as like, hey, like if we get lost, if we get separated, we know like this is the meetup point.
Right.
Something as simple as that. That would be the mall directory back in our time, right?
Yeah.
Meet at section G, meet at the food court. Now it's just a moving pin on something that has GPS connected to it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask another question that popped up in my head during our discussions before the show. I'm using this on YouTube, so I'm considered a creator in a sense. And then, there's creators and then there's influencers who are, these are the big superstars. Are we part of the problem? And I don't know if it's me, professionally, because again, I don't have a huge following. But are the behaviors that we're doing on our show, where at the end of each show I go, hey, like, subscribe, comment. And again, we do that because we want the YouTube algorithm to show our show to more people. And so, but is that part of feeding the addiction? And then the other aspect of that, if I was a young person and I created a video for Instagram or TikTok, and then I got a viral hit, that would give me so much dopamine that it'd be like, I got to do this again. And then I start creating these videos and I become a content creator in effect. Does the atmosphere that we live in now, where we have all of these viral hit people that, some of them are getting a lot of money. Mr. Beast makes a lot of money. There's this girl, Charlie something, who got a Dunkin' Donuts endorsement from all of her TikTok dances. I was in New York City with my daughter once, and there was a big crowd of people. We were trying to get to our hotel, and there was a big crowd of people, and these limos were pulling up, and so we had to wait for these people to get out of the limo, and everyone starts screaming. And someone else asked me, who is that? And I was like, I don't know who it is. And then my daughter's like, oh, that's Noah Beck. He's a famous TikToker. And I'm like, okay. So now we've got celebrity culture involved in this. Does that feed the addiction for people watching or wanting to become like that? Is that part of the problem that we're now seeing too?
It's
a long way to get to the question, Sean Paul. I'm sorry.
No, but I'm really happy that you paved it that way, because I think the start point was just addressing the use of virality.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, so if I can just turn back really quick, addiction and virality. How do you address a virus? Right. You heal it. You sort of rest, take a break from it. But in terms of the purpose of virality for content creators and content consumers, a line that is blurred. Versus, you have your Hollywood stars, like Adam Sandler is clearly Adam Sandler.
Right.
That Noah person that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Could probably walk into Times Square and never realize it unless a kid told me, oh, by the way, that's so-and-so. He has 10 million followers. But the line, so let me address the creator piece first.
Sure.
Never feel guilty about the epilogue of make sure to
subscribe,
hit the like button, comment, subscribe, notification bell, because that feeds into human connection, right? I'm not going to minimize the business aspect of it. Sure, you need viewers, but ultimately that's the driving force of the YouTube community, right? Be part of this. Continue the dialogue with me. Continue to check in so you're informed.
Okay.
Right? And so shifting it over to Mr. Beast, I think it's timely that you mentioned him as part of this segment. He tweeted, was it 5 days ago? If I can quote him, it's painful to see people quit their job, drop out of school to make content full time before they're ready. For every person like me that makes it, thousands don't. Keep that in mind and be smart, please. So again, there's that idea of a lot of good can come out from it. From a consumer perspective, Mr. Beast, and I'll even say so for you too, Keith, don't minimize the audience that you have,
right? Because
the purpose that you serve is you're being informed. For Mr. Beast's audience, they're being inspired, but both you and Mr. Beast are taking accountability in terms of what are the effects of the content that I put out, and what do I do as a result of that? What is my response after my reflection? And so that idea of, okay, is this a bad thing? I think it's dangerous to oversimplify it.
Yeah.
And Mr. Beast said it best. I don't think it's necessarily, these kids aren't looking to doom scroll. They're enjoying their content, but they're also I can be viral. I can make a post.
Right. Is there an addiction part of it from the creator standpoint, where you can become addicted to creating content, and if it doesn't go anywhere, then that becomes it could become a behavioral issue? I'm going to get another example. Again, my youngest daughter had a YouTube channel for about 3 or 4 months. We got her a channel and she started creating some videos, and at first they were fun videos where she was talking, and then she discovered that if she re-edited a cartoon video, that was kind of the thing to do at the time. Then all of a sudden, she got 10,000 views, and she was like, wow, this is great. But then she's like, well, now I have to keep doing that thing. And then the focus of the channel completely changes because of the virality and can people become obsessed with this content creation thing down?
Absolutely. Depending on the context of how you utilize the platform, what your expectations are out of it, it can turn, because for some people it can be this is my business, so I need a certain amount of likes and subscribers.
Yeah.
For adolescents, it can be a portion of unfortunately, that idea of I'm valid, I'm wanted because these many likes said
Right.
so,
Right.
versus I made the content because I completely enjoy making slime, and I'm
Right.
going to make a slime tutorial. I don't care if my 3 subscribers, my mom, my dog, and my best friend watch it.
Yeah.
As long as I made that video, I'm happy. And part of that is that, again, that active discussion with your family unit, and also for adolescents and the adults out there, that active inventory that you take in with yourself. Like, what's driving the content that I'm creating? Because what was once helpful, informative, and educational has now become clickbait for the likes.
Yeah.
Whatever adages you want
Yeah.
to use, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I just need, for my kids, I need to ask them more of, are you posting this because, what effect do you want to have from that post? Are you doing this post because you want more people to come to the school play? Are you doing this post because you want, and that's fine. Are you doing this because you want the dopamine hit, or do you want to be more liked? Do you want to be more popular? Do you want to, and if I can have that discussion with my kids to find out why they're doing some of these posts, then you can have that conversation about, well, maybe that's not a great idea. Maybe you shouldn't do this. And maybe, or this is fine because we want to get people to come to a show or come to watch more videos.
Yeah, narrative therapy is an approach that you're describing a little bit, and ultimately, you want it to be a creationist standpoint in terms of they're dictating their own narrative, and as a parent, you're either that coach or that cheerleader on the sideline.
Right.
You can't play the game for them, but you can say, "Hey, what happens next?" Or is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea?
Yeah.
Part of the convo we had prior to jumping on screen is I always ask people to ask themselves, is this helpful or is this hurtful? Mm-hmm. And I think that can be key, especially with children. Hey, is this video and what you want with it, is it helpful or hurtful to you?
Right. That's another great question that parents can ask. John Paul, one more kind of question before we wrap up. A lot of times when you talk about adolescent behavior and these types of things, like, again, you gave the example of you were playing Nintendo all the time. I gave the example of TV. Eventually, I grew out of that. Eventually, I'm hoping that you're still not addicted to your Nintendo the way you were as a kid. Is this something, is social media addiction something that will have longer term effects on people, do you think? Or is it going to be as kids grow up and they start experiencing young adulthood and getting a job and doing all that not goes away completely, but can be more managed? Is it just a thing of, is this just an adolescent thing that we're looking at?
I don't think it's an adolescent thing, or as our parents and their parents framed, it's not just a phase that they're going to grow out of.
Right. Yeah, I didn't want to use that term, but you used it. So
it's the first thing that popped into my head, right?
Yeah.
From whether it's, again, the Super Mario Brothers or punk rock, some people never grow out of it, and unfortunately, and both fortunately, you sort of take a look at the market and the world that we live in. Social media can be skill driven, can be useful. Social media is now advertisement. Companies don't necessarily pay for commercials on TV anymore.
Yeah.
So that drive towards competency about social media and tech is something that I advise parents of adolescents now not to fight, but rather foster in a responsible sense, because it's not going to go away. It's just more so as we launch our children into adulthood, where do their values lie in terms of the world that they live in? Where does their purpose fall under the tools that they have in front of them?
Right.
And ultimately, are we okay with progress? Technology equals progress for me. And there's scary aspects about progress, because sometimes things will get left behind, right? The idea of industry, some industries died out when the wheel and the car were invented.
Right.
And I think that's sort of the same thing too. It's not like oh, stay away from it or else. It's more so, let's make sure you're confident in who you are as an individual so you don't fall into the traps of the dangers of social media.
All right, some great advice again, John Paul. Thanks again for joining us on the episode. Some really good advice for parents out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
All right, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and add any comments you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.